we're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's April 11th here in Seoul. I'm Shin-Yun, and this is News Generation, where we make the news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning, we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Choi Ji-hee.
Good morning, Yun.
Good morning. And Park Ki-hoon.
Good morning, Ann.
Good morning. And both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. But we're going to start with our news feed, a news feed which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. Now, the first one is gold prices have been on the rise. Last Thursday, the U.S. priced an ounce of gold at $2,025, which was already above the 3-month high broken a day earlier. It also hit its highest point since it was first listed on the Korea Exchange in 2014. Market watchers attributed the surge to high interest rates and the collapse of the Silicon Valley Bank and Credit Suisse that shook stock markets around the world. Moving on, it's flu season here in Korea, with many feeling symptoms like a sore throat, cough, and headaches. The KDCA on Monday said the number of people going to the hospital jumped by 85.2% in the last week of March. Health authorities cited flying dust and lifting a face mask that actually contributed to more people catching these diseases. And then back in October last year, Elon Musk said his secret to looking fit, ripped, and healthy was Wegovy. Now, this is an injectable originally made to help manage diabetes, but it gained FDA approval last summer for chronic weight management. On the internet, many people have been looking to get prescriptions for this appetite suppressant, especially since it's considered safe and effective. And studies found that you can lose 15 to 20% of your body weight if you get a shot of Wegovy regularly over 68 weeks. Now, why don't we talk more in depth about the third news item? Wegovy is currently undergoing phase 3 clinical trials here in Korea, and it may be released as early as the second half of this year or early next year. And health experts are worried that what might happen here once this weight loss drug becomes available here in Korea. There are reportedly some side effects from Wegovy, like nausea, diarrhea, or headaches, and data suggests that people who stop taking Wegovy could also experience yo-yo effects, which means gaining back the weight after the diet is over. So this is a topic of my interest as well, because I'm also trying to lose weight. I mean, it's such a lot of people are trying to do that here. So Ki-hoon, what captivated your attention when you first heard about this news item?
I mean, to start with, obesity can become a very serious health problem if not treated properly. Luckily, South Korea ranks relatively low with obesity rate among OECD nations. However, more and more people, especially youngsters like us, kind of, we seek easier and faster ways to lose weight by taking these appetite suppressants. I've seen many friends who took these kind of like weight loss drugs.
There's so many different products.
Right, those pills as well, and they're quite expensive as well. But they only see short-term effects and end up just returning to the initial weight. So pretty much just wasting money at the end. And for me, the best way to lose weight is to really watch what you eat, do regular exercise like both cardio and muscle training. But also I think the psychology, it plays a very important role. So always keep telling yourself, that you're doing well, you're on the right track.
I'm doing well.
But at the same
you
time, you have to be very strict on yourself as well.
That's really hard.
Be strict.
Be strict on myself. But Ki-hoon, have you ever tried, did you want to try these injectables if they're out?
Not injectables, I'm scared of needles.
Okay.
But I can take the pills.
But
if there are pills.
There are side effects that
I
you
know,
were
so I wouldn't do it. I would just exercise, eat less, and just do a lot of training and be involved in a lot of physical activities among your friends, because it makes it more entertaining.
And keep your mental health at state, right?
Right.
All right. And the WHO has been raising concerns about how obesity rates have been tripling since 1975 worldwide. So being overweight or obese is a grave health concern. But what I found concerning was that people who aren't overweight or diabetic are trying to get hands on these drugs. That's why in the United States, there's been reports of shortages.
Right.
But they found out the people that were using them weren't doing it for their health. It was more based on their appearance. Did that worry you a bit?
It definitely worries me. Now, if Wegovy, the whole purpose of it and the idea of it itself is quite welcoming, because like you said earlier, diabetes, obesity, and other weight-related chronic diseases are a huge public health concern.
They are.
And with this injectable, it could help alleviate this, the seriousness of the concern. However, what is concerning is that people who are not even overweight, who don't need them at all, are wanting to get access to them just because of their looks. And we've talked about this in one of our previous shows before, how the young youngsters have their ideal type of look and body. So that is really concerning. So what I think is needed is that once this injectable it gets officially approved, then the government as well as health authorities, they must come up with strict guidelines so that people who don't really need them get to them and kind of, like Ki-hoon said, what's more important is to stay healthy, exercise, not just depend on these drugs or injectables, right?
Because they shouldn't be taken as shortcuts, right?
Exactly.
But a lot of people, including myself, understand what struggles these people are going through because, you know, you have these really high beauty standards. You want to stay fit all the time. So I do understand. But as both of our panelists mentioned, there are side effects and health concerns that need to be addressed first. And speaking of diets, today we're going to be talking about networking diets. And this is a relatively Korean term, but I think many of our global viewers can definitely relate, especially since networking has evolved for us, the thumb generation. Take a look at the screen to find out more. Heavy social media usage has affected how young people build networks and interact with people. Platforms have caught on and added different functions where we can differentiate or distinguish who we consider as close friends or what type of approach we'd like to take, whether that be intimate and personal or professional and for business settings. Today, NewsGen aims to answer 3 questions. 1. Which social media apps do the younger gen use to network with people? 2. With many people easily networking online, some go on what's called a networking diet. What is that and how is it done? 3. What's the most efficient way to network? Building networks and socializing both are very important if you want to move up the social ladder and build your presence in the job market. And the new generation is very well aware of that. That's why many use the most convenient tool ready at hand, which is social media. So let's start our discussion by asking our panelists if they have, tried social networking using social media, starting with Ki-hoon.
Yeah, definitely. Another job I do here in Arirang is as an interview coordinator, where I contact experts from overseas to request them for an online interview for our news program. And this involves reaching out to them, not just through emails, but through their social platforms and their accounts. And even though I haven't met any of them in person yet, some of them give me a really quick response, actually quicker than some of my real friends that exist here in Korea. So I think I've built, kind of a strong and personal and of course professional relationship with them. And also on the other hand, there was another experience where I was on the receiving end. I was DM'd by an online English teaching platform and they asked me to shoot these video tutorials, which pay me quite well.
Right.
And that led on to other inquiries and helped me gain more work experience. So all I can say is that as we are the thumb generation, expanding our network through these kind of online social media is becoming more common and an efficient way to really communicate both on a social and professional and a business level.
And also to promote yourself.
Exactly.
Show people what you're made of and what you can offer.
Right.
And what about you, Chi-hee? Have you ever tried this social media networking?
Yes, I did. I'm actually quite the opposite of Ki-hoon.
Really?
Because I like to keep my network quite small. The pool of people I interact with, I like to keep it reasonably simple. And like Ki-hoon said, as the younger generation, they group up as digital natives.
Right.
It's become a lot more easier and a lot more common to connect and communicate with many different new people online, right? However, I prefer focusing my energy and time on just the few number of people I really care for because privacy is important. And the last thing I want to do is waste my time and energy on people that I really don't want to be around with.
It's funny how you looked at Yeon
No,
when you said that.
Not.
Don't waste your time.
Don't. You are not saying that.
Pulling
Yeah.
your leg.
Okay, so I mean, Ki-hoon, you said you used social media platforms and the different functions to get to know professional people. I mean, and to receive work as well, right? But I've actually used many of these functions. For example, the Kakaotok, the messenger app, multi-profile function, which is where you can keep different profiles for the different people that you have on your contact list. So I have one for the professional world, and I have different close friend list on Instagram, for example. So these are some ways that I go on a network networking diet.
It's like you have different personas for different settings, right?
Yeah, because I don't want to be too private with
Right.
those who are
Don't
in
be
the
too personal
professional,
with
right,
them.
personal.
And I think that's why social media, there's like these functions like the close friends list on Instagram or the Kakao multi-profile function. These help you, manage your persona and express your ways to different people. But Ki-hoon, you like expanding your network for professional reasons as well. Chi-hee, you on the other hand, seem like
Right.
you like going on a networking diet. And explain to us what this term means.
Right. So, as the phrase to go on a diet means to cut down on your fat, the expression networking diet basically means you're cutting down on the number of people within your networking
Right.
pool. Right. So, it's all about managing the people you keep in touch with according to your own personal standards. This is quite common among the younger generation because according to a survey, over 50% answered they have experience in this networking diet. Now, if we take a look at the screen for a moment, there are several reasons why people engage in the networking diet. According to the survey conducted by a job-seeking site here in the country, 51.8% of some 4,000 adults say unnecessary relationships are a burden. And this is the #1 reason for going on a networking diet. And other reasons on the list include to focus on important people with 43.3%, which was my reason as well, to cut down on wasted time and costs with 37.9%, also my reason, and to live a simple life with 31.8%. And last but not least, not to share too much personal information with unwanted people with 20.9%. And these were multiple answers as well.
Right, and that has to do with privacy, a lingering concern among many social media users, right?
Of course. And I also want to mention what the writer and futurist Alvin Toffler said. True interpersonal skills is really about cutting connections rather than building them. And as we've seen through the survey, I think many people commonly understand that meaningless relationships can really be a waste of time and energy. I am sounding a little harsh, but it's true.
And you keep looking at you.
I know, she keeps looking at me.
She's not looking at
Wait,
me.
sending me a
Yeah.
message.
No, I'm not.
Directed at you.
No,
is
don't mislead me.
I understand where you're coming from. And Ki, what do you think? Do you think you think that they're meaningful relationships? That's why
Quite meaningful.
you have such an active presence on social media. And a lot of millennials and Gen Z try to social network as well. So as a guy with a lot of networking on social media, give us some tips.
Here's the rule of thumb.
Yeah.
Use your thumb. There are many different ways to manage your friends online. So starting with, posting and updating your social media account
Right.
could be a given, but also, pressing that like button and leaving nice positive comments on your friends' profiles shows that you're really interested in their online activities.
Right.
And also, I see more youngsters using these social platforms as a means of texting as well. So they're doing two things at once. They're checking other people's profiles and at the same time chatting. So that's another way to do so. And I think through continuous networking, you can also come across mutual friends,
Right.
which can further expand your connection. So all I can say is, the more the merrier.
The more the merrier. All right, and let's now hear from an expert to find out what she does to expand her network online, especially as her expertise include internet studies. So we're now going to include an expert in our talks. It's Crystal Abaddon, Professor of Internet Studies at Curtin University in Perth, Australia. Great to have you with us, Professor Abaddon.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
All right, so as a professor of internet studies, when did networking online become such a boom? And what type of social media apps are millennials and Gen Z using the most?
There are generally 3 phases in history, and the very early beginnings of the origin story would be around the late 90s, when people got into blogging and online forums. That was the beginning of how we were forming impression management around our persona, and it was primarily based on text or some sort of webcamming in the early days. In the second era, we saw the rise of social media platforms that integrated pictures as the central focus. Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all of that requires a bit more skill with editing and performance, required us to be more of performers rather than thinkers because impression management was here now focused on your face and appearance. In the third age now, we see a lot of people moving into messaging apps. They can be fairly large. A lot of the messaging app groups I've studied have up to 4,000 members, and yet they're considered private because someone needs to approve your access to go in. Sometimes you need to pay a subscription fee to use it. And yet that social networking happens behind closed doors because it's not accessible to everyone. So across these three generations, the most popular ones have moved from forums and blogs to the likes of Instagram and YouTube. And these days, just about every other messaging app focus on a local market. Kakao, Line, WhatsApp, Telegram are among the most used in the world.
I see.
Wow.
And we talked about the Korean lingo networking diet. I think this has to do with the limited accessibility that you also mentioned. But is there a similar term or concept like this abroad?
Oh, most definitely. In research, we like to call this context collapse or the prevention of the context collapse, where you might have one version of yourself for one audience, but you don't want somebody else to interfere in whatever persona management you're doing here. A few years ago, I interviewed a group of graduating high school students from a very prestigious international school. So they had spent about 16 years of their lives following their parents who were expats traveling around the world and were ready to go home to start college for the first time. And for them, having these compartments, this networking diet was super important because for the first time, they felt college recruiters were going to Google them and wanting to find out a bit more about them through their social media. Now, instead of just deleting all their social media to look like professional young people, they ended up starting versions of social media that showed a fun side of themselves that was so believable as breadcrumbs so that people would find those versions, stop doing that intense searching, and they could keep their actual social media away from people. And that was called doubling of profiles among these people that I interviewed.
I can totally relate with what she said right there because I also said I keep multiple profiles on my messenger app just because I don't want some people interfering with my certain very private and personal persona.
It's not just doubling. I think it's like tripling, quadrupling because even for me, I try to manage a lot, but it's so hard. And that's why I would like to ask you the next question is, it seems so hard to be managing so many personas on social media. Also, there's concerns for privacy. So as an expert, could you give us any tips on how we could better network online?
Yeah, most people who are in professional jobs who deal with very sensitive data, but who also need to remain quite connected and relatable to people on social media, feel that the safest way to do this is to have separate devices. Literally a phone where you've got your social media logged in, maybe for a business that you're managing, one for your professional profile if you're a content creator and influencer, and one for personal use. Because there's been so many faux pas by people who manage PR for big companies, accidentally posting something on the wrong account, having to issue an apology, coming up with the story that it was the intern, and that's very dangerous. So multiple devices is the safest way to go from people I've interviewed.
All right, after this interview, we might be having to go to a phone shop to see some multiple phones out there.
Definitely.
All right, thank you so much, Professor Abedin. It was a pleasure to hear from you and all your tips as well.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Professor. Thank you.
All right, so we heard from a professor of internet studies, and I found it very meaningful, and so I got a lot of knowledge from that. What about you, Chihi?
I did too. I was totally able to understand what she was saying about the personal management, and I totally agree. But I don't think I will have multiple devices because it's just too heavy to carry all of them around, and it's just so hard to manage all of them on different devices. Really.
But I also could relate because if you accidentally upload something for your personal account and then it actually goes up to your professional account. We've seen so many celebrities do that in the past. And some were really inappropriate as well. So I understand where she was coming from with the multiple devices. What about you, Q?
I agree with Professor when she said having multiple devices because, I mean, if you want to be a bit more professional and like you said, if you upload something inappropriate, there's no going back, especially in this professional kind of setting. So I mean, being a bit more tedious with your social media platforms and whatnot, I think could be a nice way to really show that you're ready in the real world.
All right. And before we continue our talks, let's also hear our global viewers and what they feel about networking. Take a look at the screen to find out what a few of them had to say. So Chris Miller said, I feel like networking is important, especially in the early stages of your career. Benny said, networking for me is not important as of now, and if I can manage it, I do connect with them. Merlin said, networking is good for business at times, but people obsess on social media way too much. And these are all great comments that our viewers had to share with us. And I think they could be a really good segue for us to continue on to our final thoughts. So I would like to ask you guys a final question before we wrap up. Any tips on how you guys would better network on social media, starting with you, Ki-hoon?
Look, I think I mentioned all the good things of networking, and knowing more people can be very beneficial, but this can only have a positive impact only if you manage them appropriately, just like how our professor mentioned. And you have to know that not all people are going to treat you the same way you want them to treat you. And some of them just might disconnect and just not respond to you at all for whatever reason. So I think, let's not put too much importance, priority, time, and even emotion into these kind of online social networking, because there are so many better things outside the screen in the real world. So try to look at it from a professional standpoint rather than, for pure entertainment.
All right. And what about you, Ji-hee?
And just to add to what Ki-hoon said, I think you have to accept the fact that you can't be loved by everyone once you're socializing and networking online with a lot of people. And my final note would be, I totally agree with Ki-hoon that online networking can be draining, and real world connections as well as the quality of your relationships is what really matters. And because it's become so much easier to connect with others online through social media platforms, messenger apps, whatnot, people often mistakenly believe that networking is all about collecting contacts.
I know.
But it really isn't. It's really about planting relationships. So what really matters is you put in effort, time, and care into the relationships that you're forming with the important people in your life. And I think this way you can also value and appreciate the good people around you a lot more.
You mentioned a really good point there, collecting contacts. That's why I think a lot of people compare themselves with other accounts as well. They compare the number of followers they might have, the content they upload. But I think the key here, if you are going to try this social networking, make sure not to compare yourself. Be happy with where you are, with what you're doing, because at the end of the day, you should, be close with the people that are most close to you. Give them the most time, because they're the ones that are going to be ending up with you with the most valuable and precious time that you have remaining. And we'll be here every day from 9:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you topics that young people are talking about. Special thanks to Choi Ji-hee.
Thank you, Yeon.
And Park Ki-hoon.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are
News Generation.